Okay, I'm Niam, and I'll be refuting the proposition that information listed on food labels requires careful interpretation, as it is often misleading. My opponent's two secondary claims are one, that misleading ingredient information on food labels requires careful interpretation, and number two, that misleading nutrition and serving size information on food labels requires careful interpretation. Now, there can be no argument against the fact that consumers should be careful in their interpretation of listed information on food labels, but the implied claim here is that the information listed on food labels is deliberately misleading, which I will dispute. For her first claim, my opponent implies that the ingredients listed on food labels are misleading. She offers the example of Kepler's Townhouse Bistro multigrain crackers, claiming to be made with toasted whole wheat, and my opponent claims that they are disguising the fact that there is more sugar than whole wheat in the product. The reasoning behind this example, however, is flawed. It's true that the company advertises the fact that their product is made with whole wheat, but they do not disguise the fact that there is more sugar in the product. According to FDA.gov, on a product label, the ingredients are listed in order of predominance, with the ingredients used in the greatest amount first, followed in descending order by those in smaller amounts. Although the company may advertise the specific ingredients of their products, all of the ingredients are listed in order of predominance on the food label, so there is nothing deceptive about their marketing strategy. In this case, the crackers are in fact made with toasted whole wheat as well as other ingredients. My opponent then states that some companies claim that their product is a good source of fiber, even though the fiber that they use is isolated fiber, which is not from traditional sources. She then provides evidence from an online article by the Orlando Sentinel stating that the studies continue to document the numerous health benefits of eating a high-fiber diet, but the evidence on these isolated fibers is much skimpier. However, the very same article by Orlando Sentinel states that using isolated fibers isn't necessarily a bad thing. The article states that these isolated fibers may help make it easier for people to get more fiber. Most of us only get about half the fiber we need, and there are a lot more choices to get fiber, and that's the upside. If fiber doesn't taste good, people won't eat it. The article goes on to assert that a balance between naturally occurring and isolated fibers is key to reaching an ideal diet. These labels are not misleading, as my opponent suggests. The fiber they use is fiber, whether isolated or naturally occurring, and carries many, if not all, of the same health benefits. My opponent also says that food labels claim that their product is all natural, even though it may contain artificial ingredients such as high fructose corn syrup. She provides evidence showing that high fructose corn syrup is not considered natural, but she herself states that companies have removed their all-natural claims to avoid lawsuits, and that if the consumer simply looks on the ingredients list, they can look for themselves to see if the product contains any artificial ingredients, weakening her own argument. My opponent's secondary claim is that misleading nutrition and serving size information on food labels requires careful interpretation. She states that serving size information can be misleading because on average people eat more of a product than the listed serving size. Since some ingredients that are only present in trace amounts per serving size are not listed, my opponent suggests that companies are leading people to think that a food does not contain certain ingredients. An online publication by the FDA states, however, if a substance is an incidental additive and has no functional or technical effect in the finished product, then it need not be declared on the label regarding trace ingredients. It is true that if there is a minuscule amount of an ingredient in a product per serving size, it does not need to be listed, but the exact list of ingredients is always available online. Not to mention, even if the consumer eats more than the serving size listed, the amount of trace ingredients are still very low, to the point where they would have no significant effect on a person's diet. My opponent goes on to claim that nutrition labels and serving size information hide ingredients such as MSG, but only provides evidence suggesting that MSG may not be safe and that there are multiple names for this ingredient. There is no direct evidence provided to suggest that food labels are hiding this ingredient. In fact, the FDA website says that it is required to always list the common or usual name for ingredients unless there is a regulation that provides for a different term. So there's a specific reason why MSG is listed under multiple different names, and not to mention consumers can easily look up ingredients that they're unfamiliar with online to check for the health benefits. As As her last point in this claim, my opponent says that food labels make unauthorized health claims. She gives the example of Palm's pomegranate juice, claiming that their products treats a variety of diseases without proper research. But she herself says that the FDA is cracking down on these unapproved claims. As mentioned, it is required that labels claiming health benefits that have not been verified by the FDA specifically state that their statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. In conclusion, my opponent's claim that food labels are misleading is not backed by sufficient evidence and is based off of invalid inferences and flawed reasoning.
Thank you. All right. Well, the organizational stuff is solid. There's a good preview of what we're going to be talking about. I think that you went right after the argument by pointing out problems with the way the advocate is reasoning and making inferences from the evidence that they're talking about. And each of the points that you talk about it as you get to it is explained very clearly, kind of setting up, here's what the advocate is saying, here's why that kind of inference is problematic, and in fact often providing us with some standard by which we should judge it from a legal perspective to show that in fact it is a reasonable thing that the advertisers or the product labels are actually engaged in. And I thought you did a very good job on that. I thought especially you had a good counterclaim on the isolated fiber argument that suggests that evidence from the advocate's own source says that in the long run this could be a beneficial thing because it is going to encourage consumption because it's tastier or because it's more palatable to the consumers. And a demonstration that there's no harmful consequence of this, I think, is also important. The issue about the all-natural products and labels, I think you've got this argument in three different places where you say, in essence, the only reason that this is being mentioned and that there's any proof of it is that the FDA is, in fact, cracking down on this. So, in essence, they're saying this is going on and the FDA is doing something about it, so why is this an issue? I think that's the way you want to phrase that point. You've got a valid point there. In essence, what you're doing is you're diminishing that claim and saying the advocate's own argument diminishes that this is important because they are on top of this very kind of thing. Now, does it happen? It's against the law to speed, but it does happen. But that doesn't mean that they aren't enforcing it and that you're not going to get a ticket if you are speeding. You're still likely to get a ticket. You kind of explain how this argument works so that the audience understands how to interpret those particular points. But I thought you did a good job on those kinds of things. And you've always got, you repeatedly come back to the argument about how the ingredient list is required to list the primary ingredients or the largest ingredients first, and that making the argument that consumers who are concerned about these kinds of things have access to that information. First of all, they got the label to read. Plus, it's not hard to do research on these products nowadays. People have their smartphones with them when they're walking through the grocery store. The fact that there's an ingredient that's a different name for MSG someplace and that name might be something that people are unfamiliar with, all they have to do is plug in a term that they're unfamiliar with into their search engine, and all of a sudden it's going to come up and say, oh, that's MSG. I don't want to use that. I don't want to eat that particular product. Also, I think one thing that you missed is an opportunity to point out that there's perhaps no documentation, there's any harm that occurs because of this mislabeling, just that there is, at worst, some mislabeling that gets corrected or that is it's not mislabeling, it's legitimate, but even if it is a problem, even if it is mislabeling, what's the consequences of this? Kind of put this in perspective. It's a tempest in a teapot sort of argument. All right, and I thought you did a nice job on that. All right, thank you.